As the Russian invasion enters its third week, capital Kyiv is still holding strong. While Russian troops continue to inch towards the city, civilians are fleeing from the Kyiv region. Videos have surfaced showing residents carrying small children, rucksack, pets, fleeing to the nearest evacuation points in the hunt for safety from the relentless Russian airstrikes. While families continue to flee the war-torn city, the capital has turned fortress to repel the advancing Russian forces. Ukrainian army personnel and soldiers are holding strong, and in a video released by Kyiv soldiers, they can be seen holding positions on the outskirts of the capital. While new members of the Ukrainian territorial forces are also training to operate anti-tank weapons during military exercises. Here's a special report.
New recruits to Ukraine's territorial defense forces in Kyiv got a lesson on Wednesday in newly arrived weaponry meant to punch a hole through a Russian tank. And this instructor, who only gave his name as Alex, told Reuters these men were ready to welcome the Russian army when it tries to take the city.
Russians can enter Kyiv, but they're not going to leave it. They're all going to burn up here.
Many expected Kyiv to quickly fall in the early days of the war. But more than 2 weeks into the Russian invasion, which Moscow calls a special military operation, Moscow's military missteps and tenacious Ukrainian resistance has kept the capital from changing hands.
Of course, we understand and see that the enemy wants to seize Kyiv. We understand that very well.
Alexei Kuleva is the governor of the Kyiv region.
Of course, they were not able to seize Kyiv immediately. Their aim was to do so in 2 or 3 days. This is a well-known fact. They failed because of the heroic actions of our armed forces and ordinary people who stood up to defend our city, our country.
He spoke to Reuters about the struggle ahead in almost apocalyptic terms.
For us, this is Judgment Day. It is a struggle between good and evil. And either way, we would die, but we would not let them seize our city.
Sounds and symbols of Ukrainian resolve spring up around the city. On Wednesday, the remaining musicians of the Kyiv Classic Symphony Orchestra performed the Ukrainian and European Union anthems. The show was broadcast live on Ukrainian TV. The conductor called the concert an action for peace. That is the message here, praying for peace, preparing for battle.
And Vladislav Davidzon, non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council, joining us live from Kyiv now. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. Talks between Russian and Ukrainian foreign ministers are currently underway. What can we expect on that front?
Hello, and thank you for having me on again. I believe that the Russians are totally incentivized to try to waste time. Every moment that the Ukrainian state does not fall and the capital does not fall to Russian forces, every minute that Mariupol is not surrendered, every moment that Nikolaev, the city in the south, does not fall and does not open the road to the taking of Odessa, is a moment that the Ukrainian army and state survives.
Right.
The Ukrainians are trading territory for time.
Right. In fact, I was just going to come to this. Russian forces are closing in on Kyiv. How do you assess the strategies in development and advancement of the Russian troops?
The Russians are not going to be able to achieve their political objectives. Their civilian leadership gave them very silly and very delusional political objectives, which are now more or less impossible. But they still have superior technology, the Air Force, control of the air, more or less. They have the superior numbers, they have the better tech, they have the more advanced weaponry. So they still are in the game. This war is not over. It could go either way. It could go in the direction of stalemate. It could go in the direction of partition. It could go in the direction of a years-long conflict. So it could still go in several directions. But the Russians need to take objectives and quickly.
All right. Given all these scenarios, when you say political objectives, what are you referring to here?
Well, so the Russians 2 weeks ago thought that they were going to roll over this country, that they're going to be welcomed with open arms in the Russian-speaking cities. They thought that the Ukrainian army would collapse and dissolve under the bombing in 3 days. They thought that Kyiv would fall in 3-4 days maximum. They thought that they would be able to annex large parts of the country and maybe even partition, maybe take the whole country. They're no longer able to do that. At best, they can have some sort of medium-term victory, take some cities, and try to sue for peace and get the neutrality status. They could ask for Lugansk and Donetsk to be recognized. They can ask for Crimea. They can ask for political issues, but they can't take this country.
All right, so thank you for breaking that down for us. Now, this has, of course, displaced thousands of Kyiv residents as well. What can you tell us about the humanitarian corridors and the evacuation efforts here?
It's utterly horrific. It's utterly horrific. I myself had to leave Ukraine for 3 days in order to take my own family out. What I saw on the border was utterly horrible. Children weeping, women, Romanian experts and volunteers passing food through the chain link fences to weeping mothers, giving blankets over the fences. It's utterly horrific what's going on. It's horrific. That said, the corridors are a bad idea. A lot of them have been reported to be mined. The Russians are well known for what they did in Syria, and it's looking like a serious scenario from the way they're going, for mining and bombing the quote-unquote green corridors. So again, I've told many people this, I've told my own family, I'm not sending my own family through one of those corridors. It's just a bad idea.
All right, sir. Our soldiers are holding positions outside of Kyiv to defend the capital. What can you tell us about that? How long do you think the Russian forces can be stalled?
Well, look, they can be stalled on the ground indefinitely because they just do not have the manpower. They have bad morale, and the Americans and the Europeans gave the Ukrainians enough manipads and anti-javelin rockets that they fire over their shoulder to blow up a lot of Russian tanks. The Russians just do not have enough manpower on the ground in order to take a city of 3-4 million like Kyiv, which is very big. It's a very big city. It's not a small town. They can bomb a lot of stuff from the air, and that's what they're going to be doing more and more, as we're seeing in the last 2 days. But they're not going to be able to take the city without large-scale urban fighting. And they will be taking the small towns like Irpin around the periphery of the city and putting a siege on it. But how do you take 3.5 million people city when it's 100,000 men at arms, when you don't even have 100,000 men? It's just not going to happen.
Right. And lastly, before we wrap up, you mentioned military aid here. How effective do you think they've been in empowering the Ukrainian army and volunteers?
The Ukrainian army against the mechanized forces, the tanks, the BMPs of the Russians, they're doing very well. They're doing well on mowing down Russian infantry who do not want to fight and are fighting badly and were not prepared for this conflict and are psychologically, spiritually, morally, politically not prepared for the fight. If it were only ground forces and infantry and mechanized forces, the Ukrainians would grind this out and they would win in the long term, which they will as long as they have enough forces. We don't know how bad the Ukrainian army is doing. We just don't have any information. So in the long term, all the only ground and mechanized forces, the Ukrainians will win. But the Russians have an air force.
Right. Mr. Vladislav Davizon, thank you so much for joining us with all your inputs on this.
Thank you so much for having me.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.